It's lovely to speak with you guys. I have been a big fan. And, Adam, I was really curious. A lot of people know you for your more like comedic roles, of course, the Step Brothers, Parks and Rec. I was just curious, like, what drew you to this specific role?
A few years ago, Ben just called me and told me the general idea of the show, like the quick 3 sentence elevator pitch of the big idea of you going to work and not knowing who you are in the outside world. And then when you're home in the outside world, you have no idea what you do at work, what your job actually is. And I just couldn't stop thinking about it for the next couple of years. And luckily stayed in touch and I got to actually do it. And it's just a dream role, something I've really feel like genuinely I've been waiting my whole career for a role like this, and couldn't have been luckier with being able to do it with Ben.
And Ben, I think that, I mean, thrillers and comedies have a lot in common in sense of like timing. That's, I think, a big part of it, in my opinion. Did it feel like you had to learn anything new for this, or did it kind of feel like it came naturally?
I feel like I learned so much doing this. I mean, the tone of the show is kind of a combination of different things. So that was one of the things going in, was figuring out what the reality and the feeling of the show should be, because there's humor in it, I think, and there's also this sort of weird, dark uneasiness too that's going on, and it was fun actually exploring that. But every time you go out and do something, the hope is you're going to learn something. I think if you're working in a space that you've been in a lot and you don't feel like you're challenging yourself, you're not going to really find as much. So this one was definitely a lot of learning and fun, because we were sort of figuring it out as we went along a little bit.
Was there anything that surprised you about, I mean, it's kind of like Black Mirror in that sense, Ben, just like, I'm curious what your process was going into it. Did you look at any other shows or movies?
Well, anytime that I go into making something, usually it's there's a lot of influences and ideas and thoughts that are just in your head from just your experience as a person. For me, it's like everything I've like watched and read and experienced as a kid and through my life. So a lot of the movies for me of the early 70s are some of my favorites, and there are some elements, I think, in this one that reminded me also of shows that I remember seeing as a kid, like some of those weird British thrillers like The Prisoner, and just the idea of this sort of these stark interiors, and then we looked at a lot of photography and different with our designer, production designer, and cinematographer. We kind of like just started looking at a lot of stuff and try to find these inspirations that for what's on the page. But really, what Dan had written was, I thought, very unique and interesting. And while it felt familiar in a lot of ways, it also felt totally unique. And I think he built on certain genres, comedies included, office, workplace comedies, that I think were a big part of this. So I'd say for me, as a movie, as much as Office Space was as much a part of this as Parallax View or something,
And Adam, I mean, to me, there are similarities between the Emmys and Outies, but did you feel like it was difficult to go between those like two kind of characters in a sense?
Yeah, it was definitely a challenge to jump back and forth between the different sides of the character, but it definitely is one guy. We were just exploring the kind of different halves of the same person, one who's in the outside world and has 40 odd years of life experience and is grieving his wife, and then one on the inside who's, for all intents and purposes, 2.5 years old, and is sort of fresh and more innocent, but is carrying all of those different feelings and emotions in with him. He just doesn't know what they are, right? And so it was always just sort of a math problem to be working out every day, either subtracting or adding between the two, and what's going on and how that might manifest itself physically. And it was extremely challenging, but really, really fun. It never stopped being a challenge the whole time.
And watching it, I felt, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of like subliminal spaces, like that familiarity that you feel within The Office.
Uh-huh.
Did this feel, I mean, for you, you're in it. Did it feel ever like personal? I mean, everybody has a job that they're not really that attached to. I was curious, like, what was it like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we were shooting in that office area for, you know, off and on for 9 months. You know, after a couple of weeks, it just feels like that's your office and this is your workplace. And in order to get to that office, we had to walk through lots of hallways, just like you have to on the show. And so it really was the place where we would go and sit down, turn our computer on, and start plugging away on a scene. And so I think pretty quickly, Britt, Zach, and John Turturro and I got connected to our little desk areas and interacted with each other as if we were office mates. It just sort of physically manifested itself into this thing, and we were these kind of corporate co-workers, both in real life and on the show. It was really interesting.
And Ben, do you feel like setting up this whole environment helped you in like directing the roles and everything, like that sense of familiarity?
Yeah, I mean, it was important to create a space that was that felt complete, because there's a certain amount of claustrophobia, I think, that is just part of the show in terms of that they're stuck on this severed floor. So in designing the set, we made sure that everything worked. So the terminals worked. Our prop master went to the Rhode Island School, Rhode Island Museum of Computers, and found these great old computers that we then created our sort of amalgam console workstation for these guys, and then had them actually working so that they could be doing the refining that they're doing in the show. And then the actual set, all the hallways connected, and you know, it was important that it just felt like a real environment. And I think that, as Adam was saying, then the actors could sort of settle in there and feel like they were really were working in a real place.
And the history and the culture of the Lumen Corporation has all been thought out and created by Dan Erickson and kind of brought to life by Ben, and even to the point where in the main office area there is a painting of Keir Egan, the kind of matriarch of the family that runs the corporation. Underneath it, there's this little shelf with this little book in it, and you pull it out. It's not just a prop. There's actual writings in there that Dan had written. And so everything on the set and the vending machine has actual Lumen snacks in it. Everything has been thought of, and it goes far deeper than most sets you're on, where you do a little investigating, you realize it's just a fake something or a prop. But everything was felt incredibly real.